In today's lesson, you're gonna learn about the down and out city of Detroit, Michigan. You're gonna learn about it with Lauren, who is a native of Detroit. And by the time you finish this lesson, you'll be able to organize information about a boomtown in your country so that you can have an interesting conversation on this topic with a native speaker. So in this lesson, we're talking about the city of Detroit. Detroit has not had it easy as far as cities go. We already know that Detroit is one of the most dangerous cities in the entire US. But why is Detroit so dangerous? Well, we're gonna meet a Detroit native in this lesson, and we're gonna find out exactly what's going on right now in Detroit and what's gone on in the past. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Please brainstorm everything that you know about the city of Detroit. That could be from news articles, TV shows, YouTube videos, whatever you've seen about Detroit, please brainstorm it. And please write down what comes to mind about the following topics: Detroit cars, Detroit sports, and Detroit crime. You will hear these words in the video. Please write the words and their definitions in your vocabulary notebook. A gold rush is a huge amount of people moving to a place where gold has been discovered. A boomtown is a town that has grown very quickly. Graffiti is drawing or painting on walls or public places. Here is your task.
Hey, so we are going to learn a lot in this Boomtowns lesson from Lauren. You actually have 2 tasks to do with this interview, all right? So this is an excellent lesson today. How is this task going to help you in your next conversation with a native speaker? Well, the next time you are talking with a local, you are going to be able to keep track of the most important information by identifying the numbers, the most interesting information they are sharing with you. And you will be able to respond using these native transition phrases to connect with them and share your own information in answer to theirs. So, the next time you are in a conversation about a deep, important topic, you are going to have the skills to not only listen, but also respond with interesting information. All right, task 1. I need you to listen and answer these questions. All right, write these questions down in your notebook. Number 1, when did the economic decline start in Detroit? Okay, and as always, guys, if you need to pause this video to write this stuff out, totally fine. Number 1, when did the economic decline begin or start in Detroit? Number 2, what was the main source of income for most Detroit people? All right. Number 3, what happened in 2008? You guys might know some of these answers already. I still want you to listen to her responses. Number 4, how big is Detroit? Spoiler alert, it's huge. I was shocked too. All right, number 5, what is Detroit being called now? Number 6, 1 in 4 people in Michigan are what? And last one, number 7, how much has the population decreased in Detroit? All right, so you're listening for specific information today. Very good practice. All right, so that's your first task. Now, for your second task, and again, watch this interview a couple times. All right, so the second time you watch, this is your task. I want you to write down all of the transition time phrases that she uses in telling and sharing this history of her city. Okay, so for example, then, right? Then, next, So, okay, these transition phrases, I want you to write them down, and then in the answers, we will talk about the phrases and how to use them. All right, enjoy, and I'll see you after the interview.
Okay, so Lauren, Lauren, what do you do?
So I'm a student at the university in Marquette, Michigan, Northern Michigan University, and I am studying metals, jewelry, and blacksmithing. But I have a large background in nonprofit.
Okay, cool. And where are you from, Lauren?
I'm from Detroit.
Okay, you grew up in Detroit.
I grew up in Metro Detroit.
All right. What year were you born?
1996.
96. Okay, so tell me about what Metro Detroit was like, or just Detroit, in 96, and how has it changed?
Well, I don't I don't remember it very well because I was just born.
Yeah.
But I do know, and you obviously hear and learn a lot about the history of the place when you live in a place.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of just like a very large decline that went on from approximately the 60s to probably post like 2008. And so that decline was mainly involving the auto industry and the fact that everyone that lived in Detroit was like involved in the auto industry. And that was their main source of income and like their main pride and joy in life. And like skilled labor was just like the biggest thing there that like Detroit has. And it's still the biggest thing Detroit has for it because most of those people are still alive.
Yeah. And then when did the car jobs start to go overseas? Like when did things start to change?
I think I can't remember exactly.
Somewhere in the 2000s.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so what happened like near 2008 when the auto industry collapsed and the United States economics collapsed, the auto industries just went into major debt, and so they had to lay off like tons and tons of people. And so Detroit, which like was solely it's kind of, I kind of think of it as like the gold rush of like the technological age, because it was really like, I mean, cars just, you know, everyone was going there specifically to work on cars, and that was kind of it. You know, like how people were heading out west just to, you know, mine for gold back like before then.
Yeah, interesting.
So, and in that, like, Boomtowns, at least in the gold rush, Boomtowns were a big thing. And so it was kind of like, this was like what a new Boomtown looks like. But then no one was really anticipating that collapse.
Yes.
And so when that happened,
what happened?
It was just like people were out of jobs, people couldn't feed their families. You know, one of the interesting things about Detroit is that it is the size of Boston, San Francisco, and New York City combined.
In terms of
like square footage.
Landmass?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like,
I didn't know that. It's huge.
It's between 149 square miles and 152. There's like a city inside of the city, so kind of like the Vatican inside of Detroit.
Okay.
A place called Hamtramck. So,
didn't know any of that. Interesting. Yeah. And so then after the crash, I mean, how is it now? Like what's going on in Detroit? Like you were telling me some things last night about what happened last weekend there.
Yeah. So there's obviously, when there's not a lot of money, crime then becomes a bigger cause of concern. And it definitely is a pretty big cause of concern. And everyone that is listening to this is probably familiar with Detroit specifically because of that. Which is kind of one of the problems with how everyone is trying to make it seem like it's a better place. Because everyone comes in with the preconceived notion that it's a horrible, horrible place. But it's not.
Tell me what's good about Detroit. Like what's happening in Detroit now, and what I mean, you grew up there. It's close to your heart. It means something to you. You care about it. Like what's Detroit all about?
I think at this point Detroit is pretty about art. And like making and designing, and one of the things that they're calling it now is like the design. What is it? Like Design City Detroit, things like that.
Cool.
So that's pretty like.
What kind of design? Like architectural design.
A lot of like product design, things like that. There's a lot of painters. One of the really cool things that's going on is the graffiti.
Yeah.
There's a lot of street artists working. and they're getting paid to work generally, which is like makes artists happy.
Yeah. When we were there, I was staying with the couch surfer. We went to Walmart and we ran into a guy who had done one of the most famous murals in Detroit.
Oh.
And he's like, "Oh, that's my mural. Have you seen that one? That's mine." And my couch surfer guy was like, "Wow, that was yours?" I mean, everyone is so blown away by that one.
Huh.
It was cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I wonder which one it was.
Yeah, I can't remember, but...
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about Michigan is that most of it's rural. 1 in 4 people in Michigan are farmers.
Wow.
Believe it or not. Yeah. And so what's kind of crazy is that, like, if Detroit is the biggest hub definitely in Michigan, and, like, there are places like Grand Rapids that are kind of also big cities. Lansing is sort of a big city, Ann Arbor, but, like, Detroit is the biggest city, both land mass and population-wise. Yeah. Okay, but actually, currently the population is, like, 200,000 people.
Wow.
Which is crazy
so
because
empty.
At one point... Yeah, it's totally empty. At one point, it was 2 million people, maybe 3 million people.
And that was probably before the car bust.
Yes.
Right, and then people just fled.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was, like, in the 60s, there was also a lot of, like, race riots and things of that sort.
Okay. What do you want people to know about Detroit? Like, they're reading the newspaper, they're seeing murder rates, they're seeing last weekend 12 people were killed there, which is what you had told me.
Yeah.
What do you want people to think beyond that?
I think that when you hear all of those things, you have to kind of remember and pick and choose, like, between news. Like, you know, most of us, at least in education today, are taught to not even listen to Fox News.
Yeah.
So there's kind of, like, that whole thing going on where, like, you know, there's journalism and there's, like, a lot of just people trying to sway things. We see that going on with the presidential election also currently.
Oh, yes.
So... You know, you can hear about all these negative things, but you also have to realize that these negative things are also happening in your area.
Yeah.
But because for so long these things have happened in Detroit, it's kind of, like, expected.
Totally.
I've spent a lot of time in Detroit, and I have never had, like, a really bad experience. I mean, there's been a few times. One of the problems is, like, the police, because it's 151 miles, how do you have a police officer for every single mile?
Oh, wow, yes.
And the population being so low.
I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah, most people don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
wow.
It is, like, it's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, welcome back. So let's check your answers. Number 1, the economic decline, she says, started in the 1960s. However, asterisk, in researching this on my own, it actually started in the 50s, just so you know. But her answer is the 1960s. The main source of income for the people of Detroit was, of course, working in the auto industry. We know that. Number 3, 2008. That was the year of the economic collapse. And as I said, you probably knew that, but this also coincided, as she says, with the auto companies going into debt. And so, right, subsequent to that, that's when all those bailouts, those government bailouts happened for those auto companies. So in 2008, economic collapse, auto industry goes into debt. Number 4. Okay, this is shocking, right? So Detroit is flipping enormous. It is the size of Boston, San Francisco, and New York City combined. What? Which is 149 square miles to 152 square miles, somewhere in there. Nevertheless, it's enormous. Number 5, Detroit is now being called Design City Detroit. I love that. So I love what happens through hardship. Right? What we can invent and create when not so much given the space, but forced into the space, right? What comes out of that? So I love that. Design City Detroit. And number 6, 1 in 4 people in Michigan are farmers. Also interesting. Michigan is very rural apart from Detroit. And number 7, so she says, again, asterisk, she says the population decreased from 2 to 3 million to 200,000 today. That's kind of way off. I did the research, guys, because you need to know the facts. At the height of Detroit's boom in 1950, it was 1.8 million. All right, today it is 677,000. Now, Still an enormous decrease, but just not quite as egregious. There's a good word. Not quite as egregious as Lauren said. All right, so some of the phrases she uses. Don't worry if you didn't write all of these down, okay? But hopefully you got some of them. The transition time phrases. She says, from the 60s to post-2008. That is an awesome phrase. That says, so, yeah, so, and that's her way of moving on and adding information. But then, that's an easy one. And then she says, when that happened, so she's talking about two things happening at the same time in the past. When that happened. And then she says, then becomes. She also uses but actually. I know, kind of cheating, not necessarily a time phrase, but useful native transition. And then she says currently. Okay, so those are the phrases she uses. Please try and use some of these phrases in your reflection lesson for today. Okay, guys, let's get into the reflection.
Okay, so to reflect on this topic, I want you to research a former boomtown in your country. So why did this place become a boomtown? Was it because of a certain industry or was it because of technology? Talk about why it became a boomtown. Next, talk about this. Did that prosperity last? And if it didn't, why didn't it last? And if it did, why is that the case? And now, how does this city compare to this town when it was a boomtown, if it's changed? So I want you to tell someone about this boomtown. See if you can talk for 4 or 5 minutes, and also try to use some of the transition phrases that Lauren used in her video. Now, please do the activity. Coming up in the next lesson. Okay guys, you're doing a good job. Let's move on to the next lesson. Now you'll meet a Rust Belt native who actually spends some time in Detroit once in a while, and you'll find out why she spends time there. Let's move on to the next lesson.